Okay. Well, this is probably going to be a little bit disjointed, particularly in the interest of starting a fight. So we can actually argue about something afterwards. But it's probably best to start off with the wonderful Unite Against Fascism, who apparently have inflicted a humiliating defeat on the Nazis in Brum, a rally which included everyone from very exciting sounding NAS UWT speaker to Birmingham City supporters even, which is a real popular front. And by the end, by 7 p.m, Birmingham's Bullring shopping centre was under the control of blacks, Asians, trade unionists and socialists. So there we have it. We have a Soviet in the Bullring shopping centre in Birmingham. It all sounds terrifically banal. We all have been on these pickets. We've all heard the intellectually scintillating chants of Nazi scum and off our streets, all the rest of it. And we all kind of know that nobody really thinks the BNP are Nazis. Maybe some lost Combat 18 members think the BNP are still Nazis or something, like if they're hiding in the foothills of Japan like that soldier who didn't stop fighting the Second World War for 50 years. But the fact is, nobody really takes it seriously. The basis of the political strategy is effectively the slogan, we need the broadest unity possible to fight the BNP. I mean, on one level that's a truism. In any given situation you want the broadest unity possible, but if that's not limited by well, it always is limited by a political basis, is a better way to put it. It just depends which political basis you have it on. The UAF political basis, it's clear from this article for anyone who has had it passed around to them, is official kind of state multiculturalism, official state anti-racism, which obviously leads them into effectively alliances with they always complain that the cops are defending the fascists and not them, but the fact is the fascists aren't demanding the SWP or banned at the moment, bizarrely. We're in a situation where every time a prominent BNP member comes out, there are hysterical articles in Socialist Worker demanding that these people are either sacked from their jobs, up to including, as we know, ballerinas. The English national, was it a ballerina or yeah, it was a ballerina rather than opera singer, or demanding political leaders are sent to prison. Now, the fact is, we know this stuff doesn't work. UAF was formed in 2003 or 4 kind of thing, out of the ashes, out of the fusion of the SWP's old anti-Nazi league and the Socialist Action's National Assembly Against Racism. Socialist Action, obviously, or an organisation who most well known for secretly running Ken Livingstone's mayoral office for its 10-year run, and effectively just making themselves useful to to sort of soft left Labourites. The fact is, that is what UAF is. It is useful to soft left Labourites. The soft left Labourites get some free sort of progressive publicity for themselves by turning up and fighting the fascist threat. Meanwhile, the same goes for the trade union bureaucrats, the very, very exciting NAS speaker that we seem to have had at the Bullring. And the SWP is interested in it to build their own organisation. We mustn't forget the so important love music, hate racism concerts in which you can be told not to be a BNP Nazi by the likes of the Kaiser Chiefs. Obviously they're into it to further their musical careers as much as anything else. Just about the only thing that nobody's interested in is actually fighting fascists. And the thing is, if we go back into the roots of the strategy, not obviously the conscious roots, because these comrades all come from the Trotskyist tradition, which obviously we'll get to. But the most sterling precedent is obviously the Popular Frontist. The Popular Front's devised on one level by the Stalinized Comintern, particularly associated with Georgy Dimitrov in 1935. The basic background to it is obviously in Germany, the KPD, the Communist Party, had systematically refused to do any joint work with the Social Democratic Party on the basis that the Social Democratic Party were fascist. They were social fascists. It was a different kind, and the whole capitalism was in such a parlor state. And well, they weren't wrong about it being in a parlor state, obviously, in the late 20s and early 30s. That effectively the bourgeois, everyone who wasn't a communist in reality was going to inevitably drift towards fascism. And as this went on, it got more and more ludicrous in the sense that it was possible. There were several instances of communists and Nazis, although they were obviously fighting in the streets a lot, but also kind of turning up on like anti-SPD pickets together or whatever, because the SPDs are a bigger threat. This obviously contributed in no small part to Hitler seizing power. And once it becomes clear that Hitler isn't going anywhere in the immediate term, and the whole thing has been a complete disaster, we have one of the characteristic wrenching turns of Stalinist politics, which Dimitrov dresses at Congress of the Comintern in 1935, and effectively, in standard style character, we have repeatedly said communists will not criticise all the other organisations interested in fighting fascism. We will only criticise the enemies of unity. So this gets road tested as such in France and Spain. I mean, Spain is a more directly relevant example because the Civil War was very much posed, because of the era as much as anything else, as a battle between democracy or any kind of semi-progressive thing whatsoever and fascism, another front line in the fight against fascism. The thing is, obviously, we lost the Spanish Civil War, and so to backtrack a bit, what happened was the communists, even the anarchists, bizarrely, did all sign up to a cross-class government. There was bourgeois parties involved. There was the socialists, the communists, and the anarchist trade union, the CNT, and effectively they were very heavily reliant on material support from Moscow, and Moscow moved against the more revolutionary elements in the coalition, and effectively made it impossible for a successful military strategy to be adopted. I mean, there's a wonderful section in Orwell's Homage to Catalonia where he basically just explains that if the Spanish government had said like Lincoln to the slaves, you are free, because Spain has a colony in Morocco, and that's actually where Franco's base is. That's where he launched his invasion from. Suddenly Franco is fighting on two fronts. But the fact is, the Soviet Union at that time is cultivating diplomatic ties with France. And if you say Morocco is free, then suddenly that causes problems for Algeria and the other French colonies in North Africa. So this is ruled out. And a million other things are ruled out because, once again, like our modern day trade union bureaucrats aren't really interested in the BNP, like our modern day SWPers who aren't even really interested in the BNP, the fact is that because it exists effectively as a state project, inevitably the Popular Front is designed to be wielded in the service of the Soviet bureaucracy. It's for the defense of the Soviet Union. It happens that the Soviet Union in the mid to late 30s is looking very, very much more under threat from Hitler and more under threat from fascism than it is looking under threat from others. But we see this lurch back and forth with the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939. Suddenly Germany is the victim of British imperialism. And then a year late, 2 years later, when there's a Nazi invasion, back to the Popular Front. This is in no sense a strategy for a serious political intervention where you're actually fighting the fascists, yet it's nonetheless been taken on again and again. And the fundamental point that's been just doesn't get forgotten, that keeps on getting picked up, and particularly clearly in the case of UAF, although it's clear in the case of more militantly no-platformist organisations as well. The fundamental political underlying point here is the idea that the bourgeoisie can be unproblematically divided into effectively a fascist section and a democratic section, or a reactionary section and a democratic section. And it's perfectly all right to align with one faction against the other, because the other are a kind of mortal threat. The fact is, because the Popular Front isn't really time delimited, this division becomes effectively like a permanent division, and so it ends up phasing into moralism, where you have the kind of legitimacy is the catchword today. We have the legitimate parties and the likes of the BNP, who are Nazis going to want to destroy everything. This is just not a healthy way of looking at it. And again, this is absolutely as true of anti-fascist action, brickbats types, in conditions where they don't really, where there isn't really much street fighting going on. The fact is, the idea that it is still a key task of the workers' movement to be going around bashing up fascists, a sort of standing order, relies on this idea of the split in the class enemy being a fundamental split that we can always find. The thing is, both versions of the UAF almost openly Popular Front. No one wants to be a Popular Front. It's very unfashionable, but almost they're as open about as they can be. And the sort of militant Unite Front Basta Fasta consider themselves, okay, apart from the anarchists in the anti-Fa thing, would consider themselves effectively in the spirit of Trotsky. This is a quote from SWP top Martin Smith of channeling the spirit of Trotsky. And to be honest, it's there is nothing in Trotsky that they're channeling at all. Because Trotsky in 1930, 31 or 32, writes a classic kind of article on the situation in Germany at the time, called "For All Workers United Front Against Fascism." And this is kind of the fundamental text, but you don't get the impression that anyone's ever actually read it. So as we know, the situation is the Nazis are on the march. They're getting mass votes because Germany's been hit harder than almost anywhere else by the Great Depression. It was completely reliant on economy being propped up effectively at this point by America, and of course American economy collapses. So the German economy collapses catastrophically. Nazis are getting 35% in the votes, and the KPD are considering it their main order of business to be other Social Democrats. Trotsky's response to this is entirely, he explicitly makes it clear, obviously he's arguing against the KPD and the sort of ultra-leftist social fascism line, but he also very clearly argues against what is going to be the popular fronting, and it's already floating around, I imagine, in elements in the SPD, but also there was a small right-wing communist organisation at the time, sort of Karenites who were expelled from the Comintern, that he says, you know, people say that Bruning, who was the presidential candidate effectively for no, prime ministerial candidate for the right-wing conservatives, but you know, not Nazi conservatives, is a lesser evil than Hitler. And he says, you know, this is nonsense. You know, if somebody is giving me daily portions of poison and another man is coming at me with a revolver, I will first knock the revolver out of the guy's hand so I can then deal with the guy who's giving me poison. It's strictly the fact that at that time Hitler is a mortal threat to the workers' movement. It's not that he is a worse threat in historical terms, that we're always going to be looking for particularly, we're always going to be doing lesser evilism, and for that matter, Bruning is an army man, you know. They all around kind of Hindenburg, the World War I general, who by this point was completely senile and all the rest of it. And eventually, they, as a coterie, they handed power to Hitler. The fact is, they were no reliable bulwark against fascism. Frankly, they've been propagating most of the reactionary ideas that Hitler sort of seized on and transformed into a kind of nationalist movement later. So Trotsky, if anything, his spirit would be, you can just imagine, you know, him talking to Martin Smith on that level. Just how angry the poor fucker would be, really. Because he hasn't taken on spirit at all. He's just taken on a moral thing that fascism is really, really, really bad. It's worse, pound for pound, than ordinary bourgeois trends. So, you know, this just doesn't really function. So, if we are going to follow the spirit of Trotsky, we then have to move on to examining exactly what is the nature of the threat that we face today, what is the balance of forces in society, do all the things that Martin Smith doesn't. So that kind of brings us to the BNP. The BNP was formally founded in 1982 after existing in more or less the same form, but as an external tendency of the National Front for a few years. Tyndall had been in charge of the National Front and run it as his sort of personal kind of fiefdom. John Tyndall was a long-standing far-right activist, well, even before he came into the National Front. But he had well, I wouldn't say a serious split. It was a kind of, well, I was reminded of the old James P. Cannon quip, that there are two reasons for every split. The good reason and the real reason. The good reason in fascist books was that Martin Webster, his factional opponent, was a homosexual and was effectively allegedly cultivating a band of homosexuals at the top of the National Front. And it is genuinely true that Martin Webster was very well known to be gay in the British far right, and is very open about it now that he doesn't have to run the National Front. But the fact is, it was a challenge to Tyndall's personal authority. He wanted his own little fiefdom. So he forms the British National Party. It's the 1980s. It's a very bad time to be a fascist because Thatcher is kind of taking all the political ground away. I can't remember exactly which Thatcherite it is, but they talk about they just sort of cut off the BNP support, the National Front support out the ankles, something like that. And it's genuinely true. They're completely squeezed. The National Front was getting significant votes in the 70s. But in the 80s, it's a disastrous time for the NF, who split into several slightly mental factions. It's not a great time for the BNP. They grow incrementally and slowly, but they're basically making no headway. They don't get anyone elected. Tyndall's position, despite the fact that he deliberately writes a constitution so it's almost impossible to challenge it, is always being challenged because he's not taking them anywhere. Eventually, he manages to get a success. This is in the 90s. Finally, they elect a councillor in Millwall, and it's jubilant, jubilation at BNP headquarters. They finally made a breakthrough. Tyndall is talking about how this is it. This is the start of bigger things. We're going to have 50 councillors in 3 years or whatever. And the fact is, once you Mark lent me this book by Nigel Copsey, a sort of faintly brightish academic, which kind of goes into a great deal of detail on actually what's happening on the ground. They nicked an idea from the 80s NF, which never really got any currency then, but we can see the significance of it now, of effectively doing low-level community sort of organisation, making yourself useful defending white communities from perceived threats. So they weren't really going out there pimping Tyndall's ideological heritage, which is effectively it's not really Hitlerism as such. It's kind of a very British form of anti-Semitic gibberish combined with biological racism, which is nicked off of Arnold Leeds. The anti-Semitism comes directly from A.K. Chesterton, who was an early leader of the NF and also organisations before that, like the League of Empire Loyalists. They're not taking that out to a doorstep, they're taking out rights for whites, because they effectively, I think in the area was Bangladeshis. And this is against the background when the local Liberal Democrats have been effectively, the Labour Party has a very strong base in the local Bangladeshi and ethnic minority communities, and the Liberal Democrats were effectively pursuing very politically dubious, if not quite openly racist politics, and were kind of sort of nicknamed sort of London's secret racists. So you have the kind of you have the mainstream parties, particularly in the area, preparing the ground almost for the message that was coming in a more sort of organised and effective form, bizarrely, from Tyndall's BNP. Tyndall doesn't actually convert this historic victory into a breakthrough, as we know, and that is effectively the end of him. After a disastrous showing in 1997 at the general election, he's increasingly reliant on a kind of recent recruit who's a extreme hardline anti-Semite and is constantly writing in Spearhead, Tyndall's personal newspaper, also the de facto newspaper of the BNP, that we need to be backing up our words with well-directed boots and fits. This is, of course, Nick Griffin. Nick Griffin was recruited almost explicitly on the basis that he was effectively an enforcer for the Tyndallite kind of wing. This was a very unwise decision on Tyndall's part because, as we know, he got ousted, but also Nick Griffin is a peculiarly ideologically protean character. We know that in the 80s he was associated with a kind of very strange wing of neo-fascist and Italian origins, third positionism. which effectively lurched away completely from any electoral activities and sort of conceived of this white nationalist alliance with third world nationalists and even American black nationalists. There is actually the official NF publication of the time, it escapes me the name of it right now, in 1987-88 as a front page headline with Louis Farrakhan with "Black is Beautiful." Now the thing is, obviously this is not a line that goes very far from the British far left. Black is beautiful. And far left. Oh yeah. Well, you know. Okay, everyone gets back on the British far right. But nonetheless, Griffin and his allies have managed to completely seize control of the National Front, with not very many actual people. The opposing faction, the so-called flag group, around, incidentally, Nick Griffin's current comrade in the European Parliament, Andrew Bronze, is much larger, pushing a kind of it was inspired by the left-wing Nazis, quote unquote, of the 20s, the Strasser brothers, where you have a kind of more explicitly socialist element to the politics, combined with obviously biological racism and all the rest of the bollocks. So they're much larger, but they don't get control of the organisation. Bronze is effectively completely incompetent as a political organiser, and Nick Griffin just fucking walks all over him. And there's an element of that in Tyndall. Tyndall is a better organiser. He did at least manage to be in charge of groups, significant far-right groups, for most of his career, but nonetheless, he's completely outmaneuvered by Nick Griffin, who suddenly seems to have an almost overnight conversion. I wouldn't say it was an ideological conversion as such, but a sort of strategic shift of incredible magnitude, where he ends up talking to certain right-wing academics on the fringe of the Tory party and others, and decides that he wants to push a kind of electoral strategy, which is actually what they did in Millwall. Griffin is lying when he says that they won in Millwall because they were prepared to beat Packies up. It's not true. They won because of their little community activism thing. And it doesn't. He gets kicked over the reins in 1999, and it doesn't actually immediately produce success. But obviously, we know that as the years have drawn on, bear in mind that the NF, despite their power in the 70s, only ever managed to get 1 or 2 councillors actually elected. The BNP is by far the most successful far-right party in electoral terms in British history. It's had more than a few setbacks. It's had some damaging splits. It's had some damaging revelations. It's had people in and out of jail, people in and out of court. But nonetheless, the upward trend is quite obvious. So what we're dealing with is an organisation which has scaled back its use of kind of street fighting, attempted fairly successfully in terms, if we're going to be realistic about it, to convey an image of bourgeois respectability. They only turn up on TV in nice suits. All the rest of it, they will never be caught out demanding, compulsory repatriation. That was the clause 4 moment, so the compulsory repatriation of all non-whites goes. In that sense, we're dealing with an organisation whose public profile, it can be challenged on on the ground, in the sense that local organisations, leftists or whatever, can as I always say, take the oxygen of publicity away from things, but there are other sorts of oxygen to stretch the such a metaphor to be better at the community activism stuff, to be considered on the side of the masses in a way that the BNP very much strive to be at that local level, that we are defending your schools from one or another slightly dubious threat, flood of asylum seekers or whatever. We are defending this, we are defending that. And, you know, in fairness, the left is anything too obsessed with this kind of local campaigns. But the other side of it is that Griffin and the BNP are successful because large parts of bourgeois society, particularly in the right-wing media, or playing the role of the Millwall Liberal Democrats. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of. I don't have a copy of The Sun here, but I know that if I had any given issue of The Sun, I'll be able to find some like repulsively racist crap in it. And this is added to the Mail, added to the Daily Style, the Daily Express. You have millions of papers going out there effectively pushing what the BNP now claims is its program. So the standard response from the mainstream parties, ironically, I guess, with the exception of the Liberal Democrats, is to say, well, we have to effectively try and do what Thatcher did, you know, by being, you know, kind of just anti-immigration enough, you will take away the support of the BNP. The thing is, in this situation, it very obviously isn't working. the sort of faith in the mainstream parties is at a all-time low ebb. Well, all-time, that'd be ridiculous, but you know, recent period sort of low ebb. So in that sense, the simple we're dealing with a battle over ideas which are very powerful in society at large. They're not rooted in the BNP as such. The growth of the BNP is a symptom of the fact that anti-immigration hysteria, related reactionary tropes have now got both a very wide base of kind of propagation and almost nothing sort of coming back on it. The fact that the left, such as it is, you know, a large part of it is organised around either the UAF line of simply hysterically scream Nazi, or the kind of further to the left sort of pseudo kind of trot line, which is that by organising anti-fascist actions, by which is inevitably meant violence, or kind of just being more militant than UAF in real terms. Nobody's really systematically taking on the actual ideological struggle. In the sense, well, you know, obviously you will find plenty of short explanations why racism isn't very good in this work or workers' power or whatever. But the fact is, the energy is going elsewhere. The energy is going into shouting Nazi. This is not the way to go about it. The fact is that immigrants are under threat in several localities from BNP, street thugs, and all the rest. But they are under far more threat from a Labour government, as it still is, that is, you know, intensely desires to be seen as hard-lying, sending people to concentration camps, detention centres. Concentrating is a bit of a Freudian slip there, I think.
They are concentrating.
Well, you know, enforcing virginity tests to see if, you know, marriage is illegal and all the rest of it. That is, it's the immigration cops that immigrants have to worry about, really. The BNP are local organisations of some strength, and localities can decide on whether or not they need to deal with that threat directly or in more general terms. But as national kind of organisations, it is simply our job is to build a serious political alternative to fascism. That is the only actual way you can destroy it. And Trotsky very put very much effort into building serious political alternatives. No one could accuse him of simply wanting to throw petrol bombs. No one could accuse him of simply wanting to shout Nazi. He knew what he was doing. He was responding to an immediate and very dire situation. And if we're going to seriously answer his challenge, then we have to think in terms of building serious political alternatives, a mass communist party to fight for working class rule. So that was 40 minutes, isn't it? Just quickly, as a completely separate thing, there is the question of whether the BNP is still fascist or not. Mark insisted on billing in his last Howard Rooke thing that this was going to be a fight over that question.
I'm not Howard Rooke.
Oh, of course not. Oh, your secret's out. But yeah, I mean, just on that, I mean, my view effectively is that this all has to do with, if we're going to ask the question what fascism is, once again, fascism is born in a particular situation. And it seems to me that the unique thing about it is that you have kind of moment over the course of, say, 20 years where fascism in the sense of a kind of mass plebeian reactionary movement becomes the dominant form of the far right, as opposed to kind of small aristocratic organisations or kind of anti-Semitic propaganda circles or that kind of bollocks. We have millions of people in the streets in their favourite colour shirt, marching around and causing mayhem, and they all formed out of particularly petty bourgeois masses, but as we know, alienated elements to the working class, kind of declassed bohemians and the rest of it. My view is that this is a transforming moment in the history of the far right, because then subsequent far right organisations have overwhelmingly been based on a kind of plebeianism, that the little people against the big corrupt, mainstream party. They're not conservative in the sense that older ones were, that were supposed to be restoring lost nobility or whatever. It's kind of more, I suppose, activistic is the word, in the sense that there's a sense of a fundamental kind of spiritual uprising or whatever in terms of the nation being kind of reborn. Yeah, we can say, we like that there isn't a single fascist ideology. There isn't, but there are things do keep on coming up again and again. And the fact that the reason things keep coming up again and again is because all these organisations are still based on the idea that the basis of the national revolution, such as it is kind of either the honest German peasants in the form of the Nazis, but kind of the honest British people as against international Jewry on one level, or foreign interference, or immigrants and all the rest. So it seems to me that the BNP still is a fascist organisation. It fits the bill on that level. The fact that it doesn't currently organise mass firing squads, well, one, doesn't stop it undertaking the odd act of violence. Even on not on a kind of consciously systematic basis, but, you know, where they're strong, there are more attacks on local communities. It is a part of their work in a funny sort of a way, because they have a cadre base steeled in this stuff. You know, the members they pick up on this stuff on their kind of electoral front tend to be sort of, you know, ideologically weaker elements, and I don't think Griffin has solved that contradiction on that level. He doesn't, you know, Tony Blair thinks he tried to replace the troublesome left-wing base of the Labour Party effectively with yuppies who were going to give them money and not ask questions. Well, he failed on that level because yuppies don't go out and canvass, and Griffin has failed because, for much the same reasons, the committed elements, all the hardliners, the old not necessarily Tindalites, but people who were attracted to the kind of more violent side of things. On that basis, I think that the BNP has made a very, from its perspective, very wise tactical turn in a situation which is not very propitious for sort of Tindalite politics. But I would hesitate to say, very much hesitate to say, it's transformed out away from being a fascist organisation. But lastly, final point, that, you know, all that is effectively irrelevant. It's not. It wouldn't change our tasks if they were genuinely running around in jackboots. There are people really run around in jackboots. So there's a lovely November the 9th Society, for instance. You know, I don't know exactly what happened on November the 9th, but it has something to do with Hitler, because they are the last Nazi organisation in Britain. Well, no one really is systematically combating the November 9th Society because they're an irrelevance. We combat the BNP because they're an aspect of a real force in society, which is kind of bourgeois reaction, and we have to think seriously about how to combat it. And the whole question of whether it's fascist or not is a little bit irrelevant. But nonetheless, if we're going to argue about something, why not that? Okay, I think I'm done here.
Okay, thanks, Jim.